Wouldn't it have been nice if Jeroboam saw it was getting out of hand and tore down the shrine? Instead, he went from bad to worse. It says in verse 31, Jeroboam built shrines on high places and appointed priests from all sorts of people, even though they were not Levites. He instituted a festival on the 50th day of the 8th month, like the festival held in Judah, and offered sacrifices on the altar. This he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves he had made. And at Bethel he also installed priests at the high places he had made. On the 15th day of the 8th month, a month of his own choosing, he offered sacrifices on the altar he had built at Bethel. So he instituted the festival for the Israelites and went up to the altar to make offerings. So you see in verse 31, Jeroboam further compounded his sin by setting up lesser shrines at high places. And he set up this illegitimate priesthood. Verse 33, he set up his own calendar. Notice I underscored it, his own choosing. He's not consulting with God anymore. Also in verse 33, he's setting an example for the people. He went up to the altar to make offerings himself. Okay, God sent a prophet from Judah with a prophetic judgment for Jeroboam. His prophecy included signs which did not happen, giving Jeroboam a chance to change his ways. But look at 1 Kings 13, 33, 34. Even after this, the signs from this prophetic statement, even after this, Jeroboam did not change his evil ways, but once more appointed priests for the high places from all sorts of people. Anyone who wanted to become a priest, he consecrated for the high places. This was the sin of the house of Jeroboam that led to its downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. Whoa, that's pretty dark. Downfall and to its destruction from the face of the earth. A dark, dark period began and continued in the kingdom of Israel. The kingdom of Judah was not doing that much better. They were no better, but that's not our concern here. They had their own issues going on. Now Jeroboam reigned for 22 years and was succeeded by his son Nadab. Are we getting closer to Elijah? We're getting closer, but we're not there yet. Oh, I don't even have it, but it's in 1 Kings 15:26. He, Nadab, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking in the ways of his father and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. So Nadab reigned for 2 years until he was murdered. And Nadab's murderer was Baasha, Baasha. And he took over the throne and was there for quite a while, 24 years. One of the first things he did was kill all the descendants of Jeroboam. And what kind of king was Baasha? We read in 1 Kings 15:34, he, Baasha, did evil in the eyes of the Lord, walking in the ways of Jeroboam and in his sin, which he had caused Israel to commit. Starting to sound like a broken record here. Baasha is succeeded by his son Elah. Elah reigns for 2 years, and while he was getting drunk one day, he's killed by Zimri, a commander of his chariots. We read in 1 Kings chapter 16, verse 11, what Zimri's first order of business was. 16:11. As soon as he began to reign and was seated on the throne, he killed off Baasha's whole family. He did not spare a single male, whether relative or friend. The writer of 1 Kings gives a reason for his bloodshed there in verse 13, 1 Kings 16:13. Because of all the sins Baasha and his son Elah had committed and had caused Israel to commit, so that they provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their worthless idols. So this darkness is a mixture of decadence, bloodshed, and worst for God, idolatry. Worshipping other gods. Zimri, the king's killer, takes the throne, and he's only king for 1 week before the people beg Omri, the commander of the army, to be their king. Omri and his army lay siege on Zimri's city, and Zimri doesn't take it too well. In 1 Kings 16, verse 18 through 19, when Zimri saw that the city was taken, he went into the citadel of the royal palace and set the palace on fire around him. So he died, because of the sins he had committed, doing evil in the eyes of the Lord and walking in the ways of Jeroboam, and in the sin he had committed, and it caused Israel to commit. So now we have Omri then takes the throne and reigns for the next 12 years. Does he do any better? 1 Kings 16, 25, 26. But Omri did evil in the eyes of the Lord and sinned more than all those before him. He walked in all the ways of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, and in his sin which he had caused Israel to commit, so that they provoked the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger by their worthless idols. Omri's son Ahab succeeds him. We're getting close now. We've now reached the time of Elijah, of King Ahab. It's about a half century from Solomon's kingship. So a half century's gone by through all those kings, and now we get to King Ahab. And let's read how bad it's gotten in chapter 16, verse 30. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel. There's a name we all know, we've heard. Even those who haven't really spent much time in the Bible have heard of Jezebel. It's not a name you want to name your child, and if you have, I don't mean to, I shouldn't have said that. You might have a great niece named Jezebel, but hopefully they did not name her for the way Jezebel acted. He also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, and began to serve Baal and worship him. Baal, a very, very well-known pagan god that was worshipped around the world. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to provoke the Lord, the God of Israel, to anger than did all the kings of Israel before him. There's that broken record again. So here we're introduced to the king and queen of Israel during Elijah's time, Ahab and Jezebel. She's the one we've heard about through history. Ahab, not so much. I'm quoting from a scholar in an Old Testament survey. By himself, Ahab would have been a menace. Plainly an opportunist, he seems to have had a few convictions or scruples. But he was not by himself. Jezebel was by his side, using her prestige and influence as insidiously and maliciously as possible. Like Solomon's foreign wives, she continued her pagan worship, maintaining it on a lavish scale. Having bent every effort to suppress true prophetic activity, Jezebel imported to her court hundreds of false prophets dedicated to Baal, B-A-A-L, that god. Such zeal in so strategic a position posed an incalculable threat to Israel's historic faith. Jezebel is somebody we're going to read about in these next few weeks as being Elijah's chief human foe. And Jezebel seems to rule her husband. Therefore, she kind of ruled the nation. We'll see that when the prophets of Yahweh, God, opposed her heathen ways, she set out to ruthlessly and thoroughly destroy them, Elijah included, being one of the prophets. I'm sure God was not pleased with Jezebel, but neither was he pleased with King Ahab. Notice in verse 31, Ahab began to serve Baal and worship him. And in verse 33, it was Ahab who made an Asherah pole. It was Ahab who provoked the Lord to anger. Just so you know, I don't know if I talk about it later. An Asherah pole, it's like a fertility pole that you'd find. You put them in the high places around and you worship it. And it's going to help you with your crops and with making babies and the whole thing. It was Ahab who provoked the Lord to anger with his worship of Baal and his using the Asherah pole. I guess I do talk about it. Who was this god, Baal? He was the Canaanites' chief fertility god. He was a storm god in charge of rain, wind, and clouds. Ancient statues show him gripping a lightning bolt, and it was said thunder was his voice. He was in charge of nature, and that becomes very important for the story that's about to unfold in these next couple of weeks. His consort, Baal's consort, was Asherah, or Ashtoreth. If you wanted your crops to produce, you worship Baal and you worship Asherah. I did say Jezebel was to become Elijah's chief human foe. Baal became God's, Yahweh's, the God of Israel's main competition. The competition was for the hearts and souls of the Israel people. So now God felt it was time to rescue his people. At long last, Elijah's about to enter the story. Maybe we need a drum roll. I should have turned the keyboard on and have a drum roll. Here we go. 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1. Now Elijah the Tishbite from Tishba in Gilead said to Ahab, as the Lord, the God of Israel, lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew nor rain in the next few years, except at my word. So wait a minute, you're thinking, this guy Elijah comes in all alone, don't know anything about him. This is the first we hear about him. He meets the king and he says, you're going to have a drought until I say so. You would think that, God felt it was time for correction. We need to do something drastic here. King after king, and it's so bad with King Ahab and Jezebel, it's time to really do something. You'd expect maybe an army to come in and just wipe out the king and the queen. Where's the assassins to kill Ahab and Jezebel? Or at least, have Elijah come and give King Ahab some leprosy or something like that. But, what does he say? You're going to have a drought until I nobody Elijah, call it off. So is God kind of gone soft, or is he a genius? Remember, God's goal was to rescue his people. God's goal was to convince his people to return to him. God's goal was to reveal his heart for his people. So eliminating or harming another idol-worshiping king wouldn't do much. Maybe a non-genius God might do that. We might do that, but God is infinitely wise. Here's the genius. That remember, this is really interesting, that remember, Baal was the storm god in charge of rain, wind, and clouds. So they've turned from the true God and now worshiping this God. They believe that Baal is going to take care of their needs. And God is going to essentially say, children, you want rain? You think Baal can give you rain? Good luck with that. You're about to find out how impotent your false god Baal is. There is one God, Yahweh, and I'm him. I'm the one who takes care of your needs. And who does he use? He uses Elijah as the messenger. He did harden King Ahab's heart as the receiver. He's the receiver. But the important thing is, if Elijah the messenger, King Ahab is the receiver of the message. But God's people, they're the ones that will get the message. I think we're running out of time here. I know we finally have reached Elijah, and his story is fascinating, how he's used by God. But let me also point out just how this is all in God's plan, how wonderful this is. Way back to Moses, before the Hebrews even left the desert, Moses coming down off the mountain the second time, God said to his people through Moses, this is in Deuteronomy chapter 11, 13 through 18, exactly what's going to be going on here. In verse 13, so if you faithfully obey the commands I am giving you today, you Hebrew people, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and with all your soul, then I will send rain on your land in its season, both autumn and spring rain, so that you may gather in your grain, new wine, and oil. I will provide grass in the fields for your cattle, and you will eat and be satisfied. But be careful, or you will be enticed to turn away and worship other gods and bow down to them. God knew we humans. Then the Lord's anger will burn against you, and he will shut the heavens so that it will not rain, and the ground will yield no produce, and you will soon perish from the good land the Lord is giving you. Spoiler alert is, that's what's going to happen with Elijah entering the picture. Rain is going to go away. We come to the beginning of Elijah's story. There's much more to come. We're going to begin next week, starting with that chapter, 1 Kings chapter 17, verse 1, and we'll continue. We'll see how Elijah is used by God and cared for by God. And we'll also look at what kind of a person Elijah really was. Okay, so I hope you're not disappointed that we spent all of our time leading up to this. Hopefully you got the picture that God, we find out so much about God. He is definitely omnipresent. He is patient. He's merciful, but yet he can't let evil continue forever. He's a man, a God of correction. But it's a great picture of God, what he's about to do here, and how patient he has been with his chosen people. I guess I want to leave you with this thought, with this question. Think about this. Because how can we relate this to us? Today, 21st century, what idols and other gods do we need to watch out for? Obviously, I don't think on the high hills of Hamilton there is an Asherah pole or worship of Baal, but what are some other things that we have to watch out for? I know you're all wanting to shout out your answers to me, and then some of you are reluctant, saying, "Oh, I hope he doesn't look at me and call on me." But so I'll leave it to you. Think about what idols and other gods do we need to watch out for. I'll leave you with that. So you all take care, and may the Lord be with you, and we'll see you next Wednesday.